Changes are soon coming on Capitol Hill.
The Biden administration will give way to a second Trump administration. To talk about this tilt in power and issues affecting our region, we welcome Congressman Tim Kennedy. Congressman, thank you so much for coming in this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It is hard to believe next week will already be 1 month since Election Day. Catch us up to speed. How have you been feeling since winning your first?
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing. I mean, time flies. And I think right now what's happening is we're getting a handle on the results of the election. Results are still coming in. As a matter of fact, 2 races in California were just called today. Democrats picked up 2 more seats, which is actually going to bring our total to the smallest margin between the majority and the minority in the United States House of Representatives since the Great Depression, which actually gives us great weight and great influence within the minority caucus to be able to help make decisions moving forward. And look, we will work with the administration where we can, but we're going to hold the administration accountable, and we'll do everything we can to deliver results for the people of Western New York.
Something that's been in the news greatly the past couple of days, especially the tariffs that Trump is suggesting that he wants to impose, 25% for Canada and Mexico, and then an additional 10% for China. How could that impact us here in Western New York specifically, and what are you hearing about those tariffs?
Yeah, this is one of those areas where we have to hold the administration accountable. You know, President-elect Trump made no secret about it during the campaign that he was going to put tariffs on other countries during the campaign. But at the same time, expert economists were all saying almost in unison that this would have a negative impact on our economy, that it would drive up the cost of goods and services. We have to get away from that. And quite frankly, putting these tariffs in place against our greatest allies, Mexico and Canada to the north, and our greatest trading partners, where these countries account for 1/3 of all of the imports and exports in America, is going to have a negative impact on our economy, negative impact on jobs in Western New York, on businesses. We're already hearing from businesses that this is going to drive up the cost of goods and services because those tariffs are passed down to the consumer. And again, we have to drive down the cost of goods and services. We have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make life more affordable for Western New Yorkers, for New Yorkers, for Americans, especially coming out of this increased inflation. We've finally seen inflation coming down. The last thing Americans need, the last thing Western New Yorkers need is a cost of services going up. So hopefully we can prevent these tariffs from taking root. I'm actually on a bill, I co-sponsor a bill that prevents tariff abuse, which ultimately doesn't allow the impulsivity of these tariffs to be thrown around in a way where our economy is hurt. So again, we're hopeful that the president-elect doesn't follow through on this, that he maintains the commitment that he made years ago in his first term with Canada, with Mexico, to continue the flow of goods and services and ultimately keep the prices for consumers down.
Speaking of Canada specifically, other big news announced today. What are you calling for with Senator Chuck Schumer pertaining to flag polling at the border?
Yeah, so we wrote to the Minister of Immigration in Canada. The flag polling issue remains in place here in Western New York, particularly from southern Ontario, where those that are seeking work permits that are staying in Canada and they don't want to wait in line through the regular bureaucratic process in Canada, come through Buffalo, come through Niagara Falls. They turn around, hence flag polling, and they are processed. Their work permits are processed in an expedited fashion at the border. This backs up the border crossings. This creates a bottleneck. And ultimately, the Canadian government was responsive when we called for Senator Schumer and I called for them to be back some months ago. But what they did is they put in place a pilot program in the province of Quebec. That doesn't help us here between New York and Ontario. So we're asking the Canadian government to follow suit with what they did in Quebec, put in place restrictions on that flag polling, that we want to create a flow between the Canadian and American border that is good for business, it's good for consumers, and it's good for people on both sides of the border.
A lot of talk about the Federal Chips and Science Act potentially going away with this new administration. That money, a lot of it, is coming to New York State. We have this semiconductor highway that Schumer has wanted to create. How could that impact Western New York? And what are you hearing about this on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, the CHIPS and Science Act was one of the most consequential pieces of legislation that has been passed through Congress in decades. And the importance of it to the New York economy cannot be underestimated. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars that's going to be invested in our state, but particularly in upstate, that Micron would be a central part, a central anchor in the CHIPS and Science production here in New York State, and the positive impact that would have across upstate, across New York, across the Northeast region of the United States is extraordinary. So what we need to do is make sure that the promise that was made in the CHIPS and Science Act continues to pay dividends for the people of New York, for the people of America, and we can't roll back and go back on the promises and the legislation that has been put in place already.
Before we let you go, one last thing. Groundbreaking at the Tiff Nature Preserve today. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we unveiled again an accessible trail at the Tiff Farms Nature Preserve, one of the largest urban-based nature preserves in all of North America. It's right here in the heart of the city of Buffalo. Tens of thousands of kids are able to access this. We want it accessible for everyone. So not only did we put in place a $2.1 million accessible sidewalk and thoroughfare at the Tiff Farm Nature Preserve, but we also invested another $1 million for the habitat. So all of the wildlife over there can continue to be nurtured and grow. And right in the city of Buffalo, it's a real gem in our community, and we need to foster that and help it grow. And we're proud of our investment, and we're proud of the people that all help play a role in making it happen.
All right, Congressman Tim Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.